Hello Gobs and welcome to another RPG Horror Stories. I don't have anything to say today, so I won't yap as normal. Read the disclaimer at the beginning. Prefix, as always, these stories may or may not be real. I'll leave that up to personal interpretation, because I am a stupid goblin. Our first story comes from Available Regret 304. Player has a problem with women on his female DM. A few weeks ago, a friend of mine introduced his friends to us and we got along. Said friend then asked if he could join my campaign, which sounded fun to him, and I agreed after I've done a session 0 with him and got a good impression on him. He rolled his character and joined the party. Now I am DMing for 3 real-life friends. 2 are guys and our dynamic is very easy. We joke about each other and make stupid jokes about gender stereotypes. Never crossing a line though. For example, when I went to the kitchen to grab a drink with my headphones on, we play over Discord and Roll20, my guy friend said, "Good, exactly where a woman should be." Again, I take no offense in such jokes because I know he doesn't mean it in a harmful way and we can all laugh about it. A guy who didn't respect me is another story. I recall one time where my players investigated an abandoned ship. There was no crew left and they wanted to find out what happened to them. I wrote a little adventure around it, and after some hours, they found out and defeated the evil. I was glad everyone was having fun. Then the problem player asked, "That was cool. Good job, Daniel." Daniel is a friend who introduced us and has been playing for years, so he's got a lot of experience. I was confused, so I asked back, "Why Daniel?" To which the player answered, "Didn't he help you with it?" I said that I did in fact wrote it by myself. There was an awkward silence and he just went, "Okay," like he didn't believe me. It was weird and not gonna lie. There have been some minor things that have happened too, which just got me feeling that he either doesn't like my style of DMing, my campaign, or me overall. For example, he made snarky comments about every female character I introduced, them being too annoying, too cliché, too babbly, or too childish. One comment stuck with me in which he said, "I don't know, why are you doing this? Women don't act like that." Big news, I am a woman. I know how a woman acts and feels. He then just went with a snarky, "Yeah, whatever, maybe you're not just woman enough." Again, I rubbed it off as a poorly made joke since it's common in our friend group to joke about such things, but I realized that he started to make meaner comments. My voice was too high and screechy all of a sudden. My missions were boring. My DM style was not enjoyable. I talked to him about it. He just said he was sorry and he was going through a hard time. I told him that I understand if he was in a difficult place, but not to let his frustration out on me since. But then, after another mission, I have had enough and I realized that he was not just not having fun, but that he had a problem with women overall. Players needed a way to cross the ocean, and they hired a captain. A female captain. I heard problem players sigh, but focused on them negotiating the price for the ride. Short time later, they were all on the ship and the captain asked them about their backstories a bit. Problem player answered, "I don't want to talk about it with some rich." I was surprised, since the captain hasn't done anything yet besides taking them on our ship. Me as the captain. "I will not tolerate someone disrespecting me on my ship. You better watch your words." Him. "Yeah, whatever, dude." Me. "Your eyesight might not be working fine, but I am no man, son." Somehow that triggered him to where he wanted to do horror for his honor or something. I asked him out of game if he was sure, since she was several levels higher than him, but he insisted. So they fought. He lost, of course. And when I tell you he was freaking out, he wasn't just disappointed that he's lost, he was straight up angry. We asked him to calm down since it wasn't the end of the world, and I told him to leave the call for a while to let some steam off, since it was very uncomfortable for us to hear him rant. To which he said, "Stop telling me what to do. No woman tells me what to do." And that was it. I realized that he just has a deeply rooted problem with women, fictional or not, and that all the snark he threw towards me was because of this. He left a call and our friend Daniel said he would talk to him, but I didn't want the guy back in my campaign, for my sake and other female friends' sake, to which everyone agreed. Don't know what happened after. Daniel hasn't mentioned him since. Maybe he ended the friendship, don't know. Just hope the guy gets help. That was a very short and sweet story. Obviously not sweet because it's a horror story, but OP, I feel like she did everything correctly. She tried to talk to the player outside the game, he didn't fix his problem, so after he left, He just said he wasn't welcome back, and that was that. When you're playing online, it's a bit easier just to kick someone from your server, ban them from your server, leave the group. I guess if you're going to play D&D with strangers, you might as well do it online, because at least then you can leave whenever you want, rather than going to a game store and not being able to leave if you can't handle social situations. Guys, don't be misogynist. I know it's hard, but you don't have to. You don't have to be misogynist. Moving on to our next story. Our next story is a long one that comes from the user Fragmented Rooster. Control Freak doesn't like how I DM. Runs his own campaign, railroads players. Long post TLDR. After abandoning my campaign, player ran his own, invited the same group, and proceeded to railroad his players and kill me and my partner as quick as possible out of spite. The setup. So, I'm a forever DM, having played on and off since high school, mainly 5e with some Pathfinder. A couple years back, I ran a campaign for a group of university friends and my partner. The expectation was just to run a simple few quests with a generic BBEG threatening a kingdom. Nothing complex, because 3 of my players have never played before but have had an interest after watching streamers on Twitch. We decided to meet up twice a week and play IRL with an agreement that players could play over Discord if they couldn't make it over for a session. My initial plan was to run this campaign from level 3 to 8 and then see what the party wanted to do next. If they wanted to continue, I'd take a month or so of downtime and write some more material. I set the kingdom in question in the world I built for a previous. Sorry, the user has this written a bit weird, so if I mess up while reading, that's why it looks odd on screen. You'll see it in the text box. I started by running individual session zeros and working around uni classes, developing my players from level 1 to 3 and seeing how they would RP and handle combat before bringing them all together session 1 in the generic tavern meetup. At this point, I was fairly confident that things would go smoothly, as no one had raised any issues about my DMing or displayed any toxicity. Very good so far. We love to see session zeros. Again, session zeros won't filter out everything, so it's always a good idea to pinpoint on particular behavior that you might spot during a session zero, and always keep your eyes throughout the game. Make sure all your players are having a good time. That's it. I always end the sentence like I'm gonna keep saying something and then I never do. So far, we had 2 session zeros in this video, and I'm not gonna say haven't been able to filter out, but obviously session 0 doesn't always capture everything. So it's very important that after session 0, you keep an eye on any red flags. I said previously that a lot of situations evolve from people not nipping problems as soon as they happen, rather than just letting a minor thing go and then it just sort of festers until something major happens. Snip the minor situation so no major situation evolves from it. Moving on. The players. The Ranger. My partner and first time player, a generic Elven Ranger. No complex backstory, but we worked out some details that would help her RP a little. She lived at student housing with me and where we were hosting our sessions at our place. The Druid. My longtime friend who was on the same uni course as me and first-time player. He crafted a long and detailed backstory that wove into the narrative and had to convince him to nerf every now and then because several features he wanted were ridiculously OP. This will be important later. The Rogue. Druid's Gia. She played a lot of games over Discord, and during our session 0, she made me confident that having her in the party would be a great help for the new players. The Fighter. Guy off my uni course that played casually before. Again, during session 0, he was competent and gave me no reason to worry. He was also good friends with the Druid and worked at the same crappy fast food joint with him, important for later. Sorcerer. Girl off my uni and first time player, she needed the most help to craft a character, and I really had to take my time teaching her combat and how dice rolls worked out by the time session 1 came around. I was confident she would play well. Session 1 to 4. Now remember this being a bit long, so forgive me if I cut over some maybe unnecessary details. Sessions 1 to 4. Session 1. I spent the time setting the stage and introducing NPCs, letting the players introduce to each other. It was a rather chill few hours, and I see how everyone interact with each other. There was also the first time Ranger had met Fighter and Sorcerer. Everyone getting along, so I'm happy and thinking we're in for a good pain. Sessions 2 to 3. I used some overheard tavern banter to get quests rolling and introduced the idea of the kingdom civilians being concerned about a looming threat. A little bit of RPing and combat, by the end of which the party's level 4. Druid fought me on quite a few rollings and rolls outcomes, usually referring to streamers and games he had seen, where things have happened different. I'm used to him being argumentative, so I didn't let it bother me and kept things calm. We agreed to have a week off playing to level up and focus on Uniwar. See, here it is, snip it in the bud, but you know, they're friends, right? Yeah, Druid was his friend, so not speaking up on issues, very evident here. I mean, you never want to call out your friend, especially since they were friends for a long time. Kinda sucks when a friend's starting to do this, but I feel if you guys are friends, you should be able to talk it out, because I always talk it out with my group. If something is happening, I used to let it fester, but anymore, I'll just straight up start talking to them about it. Or if I remember to, you know, a lot of stuff, it happens and then it just slips through my head. I get angry on the spot and then the next day I completely forgot about it. So here's a case where talking about it doesn't always usually work. Again, some friends might be good friends outside of D&D or whatever tabletop role-playing game you're playing, but in-game, they're complete douchebags. Don't be afraid to not play D&D with people, even if they are your friends, because that's it. They skipped session 4 here. It should be noted here that I'm fine with people having a drink or two during my games and a smoke if they were into it, with the explicit proviso that no one gets drunk or too stoned. That crap doesn't fly in games, and I stated before we agreed to play. I had noticed that the sorcerer was a bit inattentive on occasion, and the fighter basically just followed Ranger's lead on every decision. Session 5, and now it all goes to HE double hockey stick. Hell. It goes to hell. First thing I notice is that Sorcerer, who's already noticeably stoned, arrives first and pulls out a bag of green, so I'm big surprised she had space in her backpack for anything else. She starts rolling up for herself, lights, and then rolls a couple more. Big red flag should have been flying above her head at this point, but I ignored this and waited for everyone else to arrive. Druid and Fighter arrived a little later, directly from work, and Fighter's also noticeably stoned. This session change what should have been the first appearance / reveal to BBEG to a mess of frustration and pointless repetitive backtracking. While Druid, Fighter, and Sorcerer were too stoned to play, and Druid tried to steer the narrative in his own direction and get the party to agree. Fighter just nodded and grinned along. To abandon the city and go off into the wilds to seek adventure. Not that there was anything out there. I'd written a campaign for the city and outlying farms / forest, and he knew it. He also reintroduced parts of his backstory that we agreed to get rid of during session 0. Usually our sessions lasted a good 5 to 6 hours. I wrapped stuff up after 3, saying I was tired and had uni the next morning. See, here we go. See, there's more, you know, more problems are starting to show up. They should respect your rules on not getting too stoned to play. I mean, come on, poster. But, you know, it's easy to review these stories after everything has happened rather than experiencing it for yourself. I'm sure it's drastically different when you're playing it in real life. And they did cut it off after 3, so, I mean, that's a way of snipping it, you know, just cutting it and leaving it out. But it's more like a bandage rather than directly solving the problem. Let's find out what happens, shall we? Downtime in session 6. We skipped our second session that week, with weak excuses from Fighter and Sorcerer, even though I said it was fine if they wanted to play over Discord and I'd just run an online session instead. Druid sent me a very lengthy message on how he felt I was forcing him, to do what I wanted instead of letting him to not play the way they wanted. He stated I should weave a new narrative about parts of the other players, just his, backstory instead, and that I was disrespectful to Fighter and Sorcerer in session 5 and had basically kicked them out of my flat with no reason. When I brought up that they had arrived stoned before the session even started, he told me to lighten up, and that he wasn't responsible for Sorcerer's actions, and then I should have expected him and Fighter to be a little high. After all, we smoked on our breaks every day after work. I told him if it happened again, I wasn't going to run the session. Good. Put your foot down, OP, but I don't think he puts his foot down for too long. Fighter also sent me a new and approved backstory for his character that basically said he was a very low intelligence comrade of Druid and that he just did whatever Druid said was right. Or to put it in another way, he wasn't going to be doing anything other than following Druid and fighting whatever he was told to. Read. I'm done playing your game and I'll be on my phone playing Marvel Snap from now on. I don't know what that is. So tell me in the comments what that's supposed to mean. Is that like what the fighter actually means? Session 6 rolled out the next week, and it was an absolute train wreck. Druid, Fighter, and Sorcerer had decided amongst themselves, and Rogue because she was dating Druid, but had otherwise been lovely through our previous sessions, that my campaign wasn't worth continuing, and they were going to spend the next 4 hours making intentionally dumb decisions, playing everything as a joke, and made their characters into parodies to make my day as miserable as possible. In fairness, they didn't smoke or drink too much because they knew I'd kick them out or end early, but it was pretty clear Session 7 wasn't going to happen. I later found out those three had been meeting up regularly without me and getting high together. Go figure. We're moving into the next part, and I'm supposed to have stuff to say, but I've already said everything that was obvious before, so I'm just going to move on. Aftermath and new campaign. In all honesty, I was relieved that it was over and moved on. Eventually running another 5e game with a much better group, and I'd be lying if I said I didn't recycle parts out of the failed campaign in BBG with that group because I wanted to see it through successfully. The first campaign drove a wedge between myself and Fighter, and The first campaign drove a wedge between myself and Fighter, and we were crappy with each other nearly for a year before we buried the hatchet over a few drinks and talked it over properly. We boiled it down to him not really knowing how D&D ran and coming in with expectations of it running the same way as streams like Crit Role, with a lot more acting and long flowing narrative from all players. He cut back a lot since too on the smoking and drinking and generally cleaned up his act. His new GF was helping him too, as she didn't take any BS behavior from him. He also said that he knew he was taking over too much and struggled letting others take control, which is why he argued with me so much. I jokingly suggested he maybe read up on DMing and possibly run his own game one day. Stop meowing! They can hear you! Skip to about 3 months later. Apparently Druid took this to heart and definitely hadn't got over the previous game like he had told me he had. He invited me to a game he'd be DMing and wove out a long narrative and lore about the world he'd built. I'll give that to him. He's much better at world building than I'll ever be. He really put the efforts into maps, city layout, backstory for the world, and nations, gods, and religions. Even his NPCs have role within history, factions, and backgrounds. We set up mine and my partner's character at level 5. Druid said to expect a harder campaign. He's a big Dark Souls fan, no surprises there. Guys, you know it's basically 5e with a bit of different mechanics, so it wouldn't be that big of a switch over, but there is a Dark Souls TTRPG. Him saying that he was a Dark Souls fan, I'm just letting you Dark Souls fans who also like tabletop role-playing games that there is a Dark Souls TTRPG which implements a bit of 5e rules into it. I turned up to the first session with my partner, playing a Paladin and Ranger Beastmaster. She does archery IRL. It's really hard not to get her to play it, but as a bow wielder. Fighter is there again as Fighter. Druid's new GF is playing too, and as well as another of Druid's friends who turned out to be a pretty chill guy. So, did the poster said Fighter before, and I think he meant Druid? I'm pretty sure because they were talking like Fighter had overreach and was taking control, but if we go back, it wasn't Fighter, it was Druid who was doing all of this, and I think Druid's one of the problem players, so I think whenever during the Aftermath and new campaign he said Fighter, I think they meant Druid. If that's confusing, there's that. Always assume your audience is smarter than what you think they are, as someone said before. Anyways, Druid and Fighter light up as expected, and Fighter is already pretty high. But it's not my time to DM, so if he wants to be a problem for Druid, then I'm not going to stop him. Session goes really well for the first couple of hours. It's a Friday, and we all had a free day from uni and work, so we started mid-afternoon and were all happy to order food and keep playing until we got tired. Fighter even slowed down with his smoking and sobered up a bit and got pretty involved with the story and combat. While things were going well for the most part, Druid was being his normal controlling self, railroading us down a path he had written, denying us opportunities to roll, making strange decisions about dice rolls, refusing to sell certain common items to us, and throwing homebrewed modified enemies at us that would have wiped us if not for my unapologetically fudging some of my rolls. Fudging is something I'm strictly against as a DM or player, but I'm fairly sure he was doing the same behind his screen at his NPCs, had an uncanny knack at hitting above my 20 AC, plate armor plus towers, and resisting the party's high rolls. He decided what was going to happen in every moment of gameplay and would not abide anyone stepping outside of these limitations. For example, when the rogue went to pick a lock to a house we investigated, the door was unpickable, as were all the windows. We didn't have the key, and that was that. As the evening drew in, I was getting tired of how petty he was being. Stuff like going for horses to ride in the forest There's 3 horses. I guess 2 of you are walking. That just happened to be myself and my partner, as his stable master sold to the other 3 players and ignored us. When we said we could ride 2 to a horse or switch who was riding, he said the horses refused. Even if you manage it, you're too heavy and it'll fall down. Small decisions like that happened all session, but we'd ignored it. And then the dagger fell. Having grown tired of his BS not working on me or riling me up at all under the guise of smiles and jokes, he decided enough was enough. And as my paladin walked into the bad guy's hideout in town, a swinging axe trap apparently fell from the ceiling straight into my chest, dealing over 100 points of damage and downing me to saving rolls. No reaction roll, no perception to see it beforehand, just, oh, that sure hurt, didn't it? Roll initiative. Out of the door and past me swarmed bandits, blocking the path between my paladin and the party. They then all rolled really well on their initiatives and took the first few turns of combat. Of course, being down, I was targeted and killed off. Then one attack on another player, which missed, of course. Then the rest of the attacks were arrow shots against my partner, all high rolls to down her 2. All I said post-combat, which the other 3 survived because of course the enemy started miraculously rolling low and had low AC, was, "Wow, Druid, really?" All I got was a smiling sarcasm and shrugs about, "Well, I did say it was a hard campaign. We had no backup characters, as Druid had stated. Anyone who dies will need to design a new character with me so I can work them into the narrative." Having survived the encounter on low health and no healing, because healing potions were super expensive, the party investigated the hideout. My partner passed her death saves and picked up the quest objective. On the way back to turn it in, they were ambushed by more bandits who finished my partner off. We were now both expected to sit around at Druid's flat, not taking part in the campaign until he decided the session was over. It was about 7 p.m. and he had no intention of stopping until midnight. Druid and his GF mostly ignored us from then on, and every time the other player tried to engage us in conversation, Druid would interrupt him and give him something in-game to deal with. Bored, we eventually left around 8. Great decision. Should have left 10 minutes in. Should have left 5 minutes in. I'm just kidding. You just stick around. It's just an hour. That's still quite a long time. I think like 20 minutes is like, alright, nothing's happening. Should have got out of there. But you know, at least you left. Some people might just have silently sat there for the entire thing. The next day, Druid sent me another long lecture of a message over Discord stating all the things we did that he didn't like, most of which was completely unfounded. Stuff like flirting with his girl, no idea we talked and joke a bit, trying to subvert his narrative and not bringing my own beers. Really petty stuff like that. He finished with saying something like, "I'm happy to make another character with you if you want, but I don't think your partner should play. She doesn't get involved enough." I flipped the whole thing off. Our friendship fell apart again, and a few months after I graduated, cut ties with him entirely. So yeah, that's my horror story. Was that justified? Would you have done anything different? Was it supposed to be seen by more than 3 people? Will this video be seen by more than 3 people? Come on, guys. In all seriousness, I think OP did just about everything correctly. He could have been earlier on some stuff, but for the most part, he handled everything well. He didn't take any BS, put his foot down. Yeah, that's it. He did everything correctly. Were in that situation, I probably would have cut ties sooner. You're reading way after, maybe days after the event. So it's easier to reflect something about hindsight 2020, something like that. I hope he goes back to that other 5e group that he had a really good game with, and I hope he keeps playing with that group, or find another tire group entirely. I hope that you're having better games now and have put this all behind you. With that will be our video. In conclusion, that was an extra long one, but we are finished now, and I hope you guys have a lop of a day. Don't let the